the 2026 Guideline for the Early Management of Patients with Acute Ischemic Stroke. This comes directly from the American Heart Association and American Stroke Association.
We're going to be reviewing the hyperacute protocols, some new definitions for what counts as a disabling deficit, and the precision neuroimaging windows. Section 1. The hyperacute workflow. The 2026 guidelines talk about a fundamental operational shift in timing. What is that shift?
It's all about moving from sequential to parallel processing. That's the key.
So not doing one thing after another.
Exactly. Historically, teams would wait for one step to finish before starting the next. The guideline now says evaluation has to happen in parallel with mobilizing the stroke team.
To make that happen, is there a specific recommendation on how the stroke team should be structured?
Oh, yes. And it's a Class 1 recommendation. Facilities need to have a designated acute stroke team.
So this can't be an ad hoc group.
No. It has to include clinicians, nurses, and lab and radiology personnel who are all specifically assigned to that protocol. The data shows this structure really increases treatment rates safely.
And it gets those onset to treatment times down.
Gets them way down.
All right, so the team is mobilized. We're on the clock. What is the primary time target for brain imaging?
25 minutes.
That's fast.
It is. Hospitals need protocols to get emergent brain imaging done within 25 minutes of the patient walking in the door.
And does that apply to all imaging types?
Yes, either a non-contrast CT or an MRI. Whichever you can get done, the benchmark is 25 minutes.
Okay, let's talk vascular imaging. This is often a sticking point, right?
Yeah.
Concerns about renal function.
It is. Providers delay waiting on a creatinine level.
So how does the guideline address that?
It's very explicit. You should not delay vascular imaging with contrast to wait for serum creatinine results. That applies to both CTA and MRA.
So the risk analysis there is pretty clear.
It is. The immediate risk of missing a large vessel occlusion it completely outweighs the risk of contrast-induced nephropathy. You have to get that scan done.
Let's move to triage. I see a recommendation for direct triage to angio. What is that?
It's a Class 2B recommendation. This is for patients you strongly suspect have a large vessel occlusion. Maybe they have a high RACE score, for example.
And what's the operational change for them?
Well, it's considered reasonable to bypass the normal CT scanner and take the patient directly to the angiography suite.
But how do you rule out a hemorrhage in that setting?
You use the flat panel CT that's built into the angio suite. If that scan is clear, you can proceed immediately to thrombectomy.
Okay, let's go to Section 2, defining disabling deficits. This is a huge area of confusion. Does a low NIH stroke scale score automatically rule out treatment?
Absolutely not. A low score, say 0 to 5, does not mean there's no functional impairment. You can't just rely on that total score.
So what's the actual operational definition of a disabling deficit?
You have to think about what happens if the deficit persists. Would it prevent the patient from performing basic activities of daily living or from returning to their work? If yes, it's disabling.
The guideline gives a mnemonic for this, right?
It does. The mnemonic is BATHE, B-A-T-H-E.
Okay, can you break that down for us?
Sure. B is for bathing and dressing. A is for ambulating. T is toileting. H for hygiene. And E is for eating.
Is that mnemonic a complete list?
Not entirely. The guidelines are clear that teams also have to specifically look at independent ambulation and swallowing. Those are critical.
Now, there are also some specific numbers on the NIHSS itself that point to a clearly disabling deficit.
That's right. Individual item scores.
What's the score for a disabling motor deficit?
A score of 2 or higher on any of the motor questions. That means the weakness limits their ability to fight gravity.
And for language.
Also, a score of 2 or higher on the best language question. That's getting into severe aphasia.
Vision.
A score of 2, that would be a complete hemianopsia.
And what about extinction and inattention?
Same thing. A score of 2 or higher on that question points to severe hemiattention.
So if a patient scores a 2 on any one of those, they're classified as having a disabling deficit.
Correct. Clearly disabling.
So then, conversely, what's considered not clearly disabling in isolation?
Things like an isolated facial droop, or maybe very mild aphasia, where communication is still meaningful. Also mild weakness in the non-dominant hand, or some sensory loss if their ability to walk is fine.
And how does all this guide the decision to use intravenous thrombolysis?
It's pretty straightforward. If the deficit is disabling, IVT is recommended, even if the total NIHSS score is low.
And if it's non-disabling?
Then IVT is not recommended inside that 4.5-hour window. The trials just didn't show a benefit over dual antiplatelet therapy. The risk isn't worth it.
Okay, let's shift to Section 3. Pediatric evaluation. What presentation should make us suspicious of stroke in a child?
Sudden focal neurological deficits. But the guideline makes a special point to highlight first-time seizures.
Why are seizures so important here?
Because in kids, a brand new seizure that comes with focal deficits is a very common presentation for a stroke. It cannot be dismissed as just a mimic without a proper workup.
What assessment tool should be used?
The Pediatric National Institutes of Health Stroke Scale, the PED NIHSS. The adult tools just don't perform well in children.
And for imaging in kids, what's preferred?
MRI and MRA are the Class 2A preferred modality. You really need that detail to tell the difference between a stroke and its mimics in children.
But an MRI can take time, sometimes sedation. What if it's not available right away?
If you can't get that MRI within 25 minutes, then a CT or CTA is reasonable.
So that 25-minute rule is strict even here.
Yes. You cannot delay identifying a large vessel occlusion that might be eligible for thrombectomy just because you're waiting for an MRI.
Okay, Section 4. Precision neuroimaging and these extended windows. How do we find candidates for IVT when the onset time is unknown? You know, the classic wake-up stroke.
We use what's called the tissue clock, and that means using an MRI DWI flare mismatch.
Can you explain what that mismatch looks like?
Sure. You look at the diffusion-weighted imaging, the DWI, and you see a visible lesion. The stroke is bright.
Okay.
Then you look at the FLAR image, and on that image, there's an absence of signal change. The area looks normal.
And that combination tells you what?
It strongly suggests the stroke happened within the last 4.5 hours, and that makes the patient a potential candidate for IVT.
What about the 4.5 to 9-hour window for IVT? What imaging is needed there?
For that, you need automated perfusion imaging, so either CT perfusion or a MOR perfusion.
Are there specific numbers or criteria for eligibility in that window?
Yes. You're looking for a mismatch between the hypoperfused tissue, the penumbra, and the ischemic core. The penumbra to core ratio has to be greater than 1.2. And the absolute mismatch volume needs to be more than 10 milliliters.
And how do you pick candidates for thrombectomy in that 6 to 24-hour window?
You're using similar tools, CT perfusion, that DWI flare mismatch, or MISAR perfusion.
And what's the goal? What are you trying to identify?
You're trying to find a clinical core mismatch. So a patient with a really severe clinical deficit, but a surprisingly small ischemic core on their imaging.
Now, the guidelines have updated eligibility for patients with large core infarcts. Are they now candidates for thrombectomy?
They are, yes. The guidelines now include patients with large cores, which is an aspect score of 3 to 5.
But is there a safety limit, a point where the tissue damage is too much?
There is. You have to be very cautious if there's severe hypodensity on the CT.
And what are the specific metrics to watch for?
Severe hypodensity is defined as less than or equal to 26 Hounsfield units.
Okay.
If the volume of tissue at that density is greater than or equal to 26 milliliters, the outcomes are probably going to be poor.
So to be clear, the threshold is 26 Hounsfield units and 26 milliliters.
That's right. That combination predicts a very high risk for cerebral edema and bad outcomes after you open the vessel.
All right, let's wrap up with Section 5, ancillary testing and efficiency. What's the rule on cardiac tests like an EKG or troponin levels?
You should get them. They're important for prognosis, for figuring out the stroke mechanism, but you never, ever delay initiating IVT or thrombectomy to wait for those results. Time is brain.
What's the one and only lab test that's mandatory before giving LVT?
Just blood glucose. That's it. You have to rule out a metabolic mimic, like hypoglycemia.
What if the patient's glucose is off, you correct it, but the deficits are still there?
You proceed with intravenous thrombolysis. If the deficit persists after you fix the sugar, you have to assume it's an ischemic stroke. Do not delay treatment.
Okay, let's summarize the main takeaways from these 2026 guidelines.
First, parallel processing. Implement it the second the patient arrives. Second, define those disabling deficits using the Bay mnemonic and the specific NIHSS scores.
And third, that 25-minute door-to-image time.
Absolutely. Stick to that benchmark.
And for imaging?
You have to use the advanced neuroimaging windows. Look for the DWI flare mismatch for your unknown onsets. And for large cores, watch that 26 Hounsfield unit and 26 milliliter threshold.
So what's the final thought for the provider at the bedside?
It's that the determination of disabling still has a subjective component. The guidelines give you scores and lists, but the final call really relies on shared decision-making with the patient and their family.
So what looks like a minor deficit on a scale could be career-ending for a surgeon or a musician.
Exactly. You have to look beyond the number and see the person.
That concludes our review of the 2026 Acute Ischemic Stroke Guidelines.
Go apply these metrics.